Welcome to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Markle. I am a curriculum development specialist here at NCBRT, and I work in collaboration with subject matter experts to create valuable and timely training for the responder community. The National Center for Biomedical Research and Training provides mobile training to both the national and international emergency response community. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're joined again by Maggie Varela, Mark DuPont, and Andrew Rateaver as we continue our roundtable discussion on some of the solutions for the leadership challenges we talked about last week. So if you haven't listened to part one, go ahead and head back to that, and then we'll meet you here afterwards. So to start us off today, what are some of the new skills or approaches or solutions that are required to navigate the challenges we talked about in part one?
Well, I think one of the main solutions that's for any kind of problem that we may have in is communications. And that, I think, is a foundation for not only for the agencies, but for the community, for your personnel, for your subordinates, and even, your leadership. That open line of communication and making sure that they feel comfortable, not that they feel comfortable receiving that information, but also providing feedback regarding that information or asking questions regarding the communication. Because I think that that's one foundation that's going to kind of be able to be built on for any type of leadership skills.
Very cool, Maggie. If I can jump into it, Ashley, and stick with the whole collegiate mantra here at NCBRT, and I'm just going to offer LSU. The answer to this, the solution is LSU, and that's simply the three terms of listen, speak, and undertake. The listen is listening to our personnel, listening to our staff, our crews, and the communities that we serve, the bosses that we serve, who perhaps might be in either a chain of command or city government or state government, with tribal, whatever it may be. But getting the feedback from our people and from the people we serve, I think, is important. That's the L, the listen. The next part is speak. Speak the truth. If you don't have the funding, say, we don't have the funding, but here's what we're going to do. Not saying, we're working on that issue right now, Mark, we've got it handled. Don't lie, speak the truth. So we have listen, we have speak the truth, and then lastly, undertake. And that's the U part, which is action. Undertake and model behavior that's positive for not only your crews, but also your community as well. You can't just say you're going to do things without actually demonstrating it, walking the walk, talking the talk. LSU is where I'm going, Ashley.
All right. Well, thank you. We can end the podcast right there. I mean, that was a great public service. No, it really was, Rat.
Really was. Pretty good.
I like that. I think we might have talked about it in the past. I've
actually got it on my screen right there. See, LSU.
There you go. I always used a version of that. Yours is better, I think, because it's shorter. But I used, make an impact. And what those letters stood for is influence and move people, achieve with compassion, communication, commitment, and conviction, with trust. All those things have to be intertwined. And if you're going to make an impact, and I would add to that, you either are going to make an impact or you need to prepare for impact. Meaning, if you don't do these things, your organization, if you don't follow that kind of mantra or something similar, you're going to get attacked from the outside and from within, and you'll be standing there wondering, why did this happen? How did this happen? I think, John Maxwell said it well with 360-degree leadership, right? It's about leading from the front, but it's also leading alongside, meaning you understand what their trials and tribulations are and their challenges are, but it's also you lead from behind, meaning they're going to need support. They might fall down, and you need to be able to pick them up rather than just chastising people who make mistakes. Is there a pattern of mistakes here? Do we have to change maybe how we prepare people to do this particular thing or skill set? Do we need to change how we're training people. And to me, that's my soapbox. I just feel that, well, there's more than feeling. There's some research that I did back in 2017 that supports this, but we queried all of the state police agencies in the country, specifically those that had were training maritime agencies like natural resource agencies or fish and wildlife or those types of things. And we wanted to know, hey, what have you changed, or have you changed anything in the last 10 years in your curriculum? Significant change. And, getting a new computer or smart screen did not count as a significant change in a curriculum. And the answer was staggering, that only 5% of the agencies had made any significant changes to their curriculum in the last 10 years. So we asked, what about 20 years? And got the same answer. And my point is that today, as we said in the first podcast, we're doing the same things, yet wondering why we're getting different results. We have to adapt how we train our people, especially in public safety, because the world has changed all around us. Whether it be technology, there's new technologies to use that may be able to empower our people to do better things, do more things. Whether it be the environments that they're working in have changed, the dynamics of those environments have changed, and yet we keep doing things the same way. There's better ways we can adapt, and training is a big thing. And not to toot the LSU horn any further, Rat, but that's what we also try. And this isn't we didn't make this to be an advertisement, but that's one of the reasons why I am with LSU. And I know you two are the same. We believe in the content that we produce and put out there because we feel that it's filling needs, that there's a requirement that agencies are facing where they have to reskill or upskill their people. If you look at our course curricula, you look at the subjects that we're talking about, these are all relative to the changing environment that's happening right before us. So I think that is a critical element. But I wrote that down. I'm gonna steal that, Rat. I'm gonna steal that LSU one.
Me too. I loved it. Yeah, and developing your people is really, it's a win-win. It's kind of like a force multiplier. So I look at it, the better. I always used to tell people, I don't want yes men or yes women. I want people that think for themselves, that bring something different to the table than what I'm bringing to the table, right? So developing your personnel, really as a leader, you're benefiting yourself because you're giving them the training they need. You're giving them the development. You're giving them the tools to be better at their trade, which in turn helps you, right, as a leader to improve that. So I think that that's a great point, Mark, that, training and personnel development and encouraging them to continue with their education. That's one thing that our agency was really good about, that, they really encourage you to, if you didn't have your degree, encourage you to continue on and get your education or to get whatever training it was available. And it's sad that I have a question to you, Mark, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but in that study or research that you did, because we tend to be kind of reactive in law enforcement, right? And we're really moving, or we have to move to more proactive, not only in enforcement or intelligence-led policing, but I think we need to be proactive when it comes to what do we need to build on next for our personnel. So I guess my question to you is, with that research, did you identify that the changes they made was in reaction to something bad that happened? Or it was something that they evolved into recognizing that they needed a change? Because I think that's what we need to do. We need to start evolving, not just reacting.
It was the latter. It wasn't. Yeah, we're all familiar with that. Every general order or every policy is usually written in blood, right? We make that joke that something's gone wrong and we've reacted to it, and it's caused us to now mandate this particular type of training or have this policy. No, most of it was the latter, where they saw changes that they needed to make to be better train their people.
That's great.
The interesting part is that when we talk about training, a lot of leaders will say, "Yep, roger that. We've got to train." But if you look at the how they go about doing the training, let's back up to something you said in the first podcast, Maggie. We talked about planning for succession. You talked about how field training officers have, an average tenure of less than 3 years and all that. And that's absolutely true. And that's the root of why we have these increasing accidents or mishaps or injuries, even so much as affecting use of force decisions. What happens at the academy level is the same effect. We take people from the field and we say, hey, Rat, you're really good at what you do. We want you, and you've been on the job 3 years, 4 years. We want you to now go to the academy and be part of that. So Rat goes and he does the best job that he knows how to do, and he's fairly good at it. But Rat really hasn't been exposed to the how. What are the new ways of training? What are the changes in adult learning that we really need to pay attention to, based on the 5 different generations I have in my workforce? What can we continue to do it the way we trained baby boomers like me in the academy, or do we maybe need to adapt to some things? And then the knee-jerk reaction when you start talking about that is people at the academy level start getting pretty defensive. They go back to what we talked about earlier. Hey, this is the way we've done it. It worked for me. I get that. I understand that, but it's not working for them. There was an agency that'll go unnamed. The person working in this agency was a good friend of mine. He was the director of their academy, and we used to talk on a frequent basis. And we talked about a year ago, and he starts the conversation by saying, hey, I'm having a bad day. I said, what's going on? He said, well, we just put our recruit class into their field training program. This was their first week of the field training program, and 50% of the people quit. And I said, wait a minute, what? And I thought I wasn't hearing this right. This couldn't possibly be true. But yes, that 50% of that academy class went into their field training program and quit. And so he was pretty upset about it, and he's talking about how he has to, what are we going to do? But what he failed to recognize, I had to stop him and say, hey, let's back up a little bit. Let's take this, another Maggie word, let's take this holistic approach here and look at the overall organization. What the problem is not with the students. That is too glaring an occurrence to say that it was with the students. There's something dramatically going wrong with how you're executing that field training program. And what it required was a revamp of what they did. And they are still in the revamp, and that was a year ago. It's not entirely completed, but my point to this is those are the types of things that are happening, and the old school way of doing things isn't necessarily the way that's going to work today. So we need to be open to that and willing to say, you know what, let's roll up our sleeves and get a little bit better with how we train people, and do some things that might be dramatically different than the way they did it last year or even 10 years ago and 20 years ago. But that's, like I said, that's my soapbox.
Well, much of what you're talking about, Mark and Maggie, has to do with the other people, somebody else, the organization. How much of this has to do with the individual leader? I mean, that's what this roundtable is about. It's about the leader. So Maggie, you were talking about, well, you get promoted, they send you to the 2-week school to teach you this stuff. And I know this. You've talked about it in your podcast before about you get promoted and all of a sudden you're in charge. Right? What does that mean? And you have to make all these, darn, LSU. So you have all these responsibilities, but you don't have perhaps, and you have the authority, the responsibility, but you don't have the experience to implement it. What are we doing to train our leaders to meet all these challenges here? And that's, I think, is an overall arching question here, because Ashley, oftentimes we put the leaders out to fix the organization, but I think we need to spend more time talking about improving the individual leader even before the other things happen. It's a Michael Jackson thing. Start with the man in the mirror, start with the person, the individual, and then build on that. Maggie, what do you think?
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm a big proponent of mentorship because I don't think we do it enough. And I think in law enforcement or in any organization, you need to have even an informal mentor or a formal mentor. I mean, I had a couple of actually several very good mentors that helped me out. But if it wouldn't have been for that, I would have been lost because, like you said, we talked about they teach us, okay, the foundation, the documents, the paperwork, all that we have to do. But no one really grooms you and tells you and explains to you, hey, you have these, for example, in a squad, I had a 10-person squad, how do I manage that? Not just paperwork and policy wise, but as individuals, right? So that's where I think the mentorship comes in. Those that have already been through that with you. I mean, I had a lieutenant that was great. That when he became a sergeant, he was in the same boat as I was. He didn't have that experience. He shared that with me. He helped me through it. I had a chief that helped me out a great deal. She kind of like mentored me throughout my whole career, from when I became a sergeant to when I was a commander in Homeland Security. She guided me and helped me. I could go to her and ask her questions. Hey, I have this circumstance, this situation. What do you recommend? Right? Because if you've never been through it, how can you possibly make the best decision? It's never going to be a perfect decision, right? But at least if you have a team or at least one or two people that you can look up to that have been there, done that, and have successfully gone through those challenges, that's why I think mentoring is so important and so needed in the future of law enforcement, the future of any organization.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's why I even find value in just listening to these micro podcasts, and even just listening to your two and your experiences. And then actually they're about 20 minutes long, and I'm listening to it when I'm working out or something like that. But then every once in a while there will be a nugget from Maggie like, I got promoted. Oh, now what do I do? And I'm like, her too? Me too. I was right there. And then Mark talking about his experiences in the Coast Guard. I mean, you get that kind of commonality, and you build that kind of, even though it's distance learning, you get that mentorship and that personal connection. So yeah, I think that's hugely important.
Part of that though, Rat, you got to peel the onion back with how you propose that question about, man in the mirror. How do you do it for the individual? Well, in order to do it for the individual, I, as the big guy at the top, have to establish, again, we're back to that culture thing. I have to establish that, I want to ensure that my supervisors, from the sergeant all the way up to the lieutenant colonel, understand some key principles of leadership. And either I'm going to form that academy and teach them that, or I'm going to send them places where they can draw from that. And unfortunately, we come from disciplines, and again, all of public safety, it's not just law enforcement, it's the military too. Military is a little bit better when you get up in those positions of leadership. They do have some training, and they've gotten better over the last couple of years. But let's just talk police, let's talk fire, EMS. We live in a stovepipe, meaning, okay, you're promoted, Rat. You're now a sergeant. To Maggie's point, we don't really give you a lot of training there, and whatever training it is, it's in paperwork and what not to do.
Uh-huh.
But we don't teach you how to lead people. And now you're going to be a lieutenant, and then you're going to be a major or whatever, a captain, whatever your chain of command looks like. And so we get to positions of truly, we're way up the top now, we're majors, we're lieutenant colonels or assistant chiefs or whatever the case may be. And that perpetual wheel just keeps turning the same way because you're doing it the only way you know how, because you haven't been exposed to anything else. You haven't been offered the opportunity to go and let's look how, if you're from a police department, let's look at how the fire service does it in our state or whatever. What do they do for their training? One of the best things I ever had the opportunity to do was I was the first Coast Guard officer to go to the Army's military police school. And it was fascinating just to see a different organization and how they did things. That I got the most out of it, not in what the military police academy was all about, but just how they groomed their potential leaders. So I think we need to be willing to open up the aperture and look at, hey, how do other people do this? How do other agencies do that? And cross-pollinate, if you will. Let's look at how they train their leaders. And what can we institute, whether it be a mentorship program, whether it be levels of training. Sergeants, you're going to get this basic supervisory skills. Hey, you know what? And one of the most important things we need to teach them is just how to communicate. And today, right now, that is the number one issue, because people coming out of college, coming out of high school, don't know how to communicate. I'm not exaggerating this problem. They've grown up think about the world they've grown up in now. They've grown up in a world where the United States has been at war or in combat their entire lives. Think about that just for a minute. They've gone through periods of riots and displeasure with law enforcement or other organizations. They've grown up in a time where the instant answer is on your phone. AI, we've got all this stuff going on around them, so they're stepping into the workforce with that as their baseline. And we're not with them as supervisors, as leaders, as trainers at the academy level. So we need to open up the aperture and make sure we're able to handle it.
There are some processes that are in place that perhaps might address that, right? Those might be provisional positions.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
Maggie, you're going to be lieutenant for the next 2 weeks, for the next month, and I'm going to still be there, but you're going to have all the responsibilities. It's kind of like Boxing Day, right? It's like where you become your boss, and your boss kind of handles your duties. It's almost like a field training officer. You try it out for a while, see if you like it, right? That's good. And you mentioned that, or the incident command system. I know, Mark, you mentioned that before. In the wildfire suppression system, they actually have a task checkoff list. So if you want to be a fire boss, a weather observer, a group supervisor, a strike team leader, there's actually a list that you have to, of accomplishments that you have to do. It's called a task book, and you do it working alongside somebody else. And you hear it on the radio all the time. This is the burn boss trainee. I'm about to set a backfire or whatever. And you sign it off on your book and everything. So you get a chance to test it out. It's really doing the actual action, whatever it may be, but you're doing it supervised and essentially under controlled situation. Maggie, did you guys ever do that? Do you ever had like the provisional lieutenants or provisional sergeants?
We did have acting sergeants and acting lieutenants. So I would actually rotate that, like if I was off. But unfortunately, it was usually only allowed or done when we were off. Like if I was going to be on vacation, or if I was acting major or something like that, that's when it would happen. Now, one of the good things that I learned is when I was acting major, because we didn't have a captain at the time, my sergeant was acting lieutenant, and they trickled down, right? And it was actually a great experience for them. So exactly what you're saying happened. They kind of saw things very differently when they were in that role, as opposed to when they were just, being a subordinate to that role. They kind of saw the responsibility different, the authority different, and how they needed to communicate with people very different. So I think that you did a good point on bringing that up, because I think that was of great value for them when we did do it.
But imagine, that's a great example, Rat, of law enforcement looking at another discipline and looking at what you just explained. To me, sounds like a fantastic idea, just to say, if I was the chief somewhere, to say, you know what, I kind of like this idea. Let's establish a day. Let's do it, within the next 90 days. Let's pick a day. We're going to do it. Let's organize how we're going to do it. My point is not do it haphazardly. Let's not do it and screw up the benefit. Let's not put a dent in it where the people now go, oh, that's just another crazy idea the chief has come up with, right? How do we make sure that we do it well? And then we get feedback from the people, and we say, let's sit down and talk about this. How did you like that experience? Should we continue to do this? Is there ways that we can do it differently? I mean, those are all ways that we stay connected. That's all ways that we're listening to them. Your point, that's what the L is, right? Right? Let's listen. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
You have to look at your notes, Matt. Really?
Right, yeah, right. but it really is. I mean, it's isn't it such a simple context, simple application? But
I think it is. But in the world of competing budgets and low staffing and
yeah,
calls for service and vacation and sick leave and everything, it's tough. It is absolutely tough. But I think we've got to start somewhere, Ashley. We've got to put that groundwork in. And if we fail at bringing up our leaders, we fail at training our leaders, then we're going to see the results later on down the line in terms of liability, in terms of cash outlay for civil suits, in terms of injuries. So we need to put the time in order to set that up.
Yeah, and I think we got away from it, Rat, because of what's happened over the last 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
We were, pun intended here, we were putting up fires and they were pouring in. And then we had this bleed of people, right, from retirement. And we had problems with recruitment and we had problems with retention. So we're just trying to keep our fingers in the dike. So that's hard too, sometimes, to have a leader step back away from it. Let's focus on domain awareness for a moment instead of just the situational awareness. I know you got this problem and you got your finger in the dike, but let's look at a way that we may be able to impact it in the future and make your job a lot easier in keeping your people and getting new people.
I think I totally agree with you, Mark. I think it's also incumbent upon the leaders that are there to perhaps see that need and say, boy, we don't have the budget for this. You know what? I'm going to take Maggie aside and I'm going to say, hey, what's going on? Have you thought about these three things? Lieutenant to supervisor to line officer, whatever it may be. But if who's in command here, if you can't find a commander, then take the command. Do something about it. Act on it. I don't mean being reckless, being outside policy, but if the organization is not handling a particular task and you can have a little piece of influence on it, like mentorship, like Maggie was suggesting, do it. Even a slight bit, I think, matters. I think it truly does. Modeling that behavior matters.
Well, you bring up a really good point, because someone listening to these...
You sound surprised again, Mark.
I am. I'm not kidding. No, I'm not. But the really good point here is, and it just dawned on me as you were talking, someone listening to this may think we're just talking to the chiefs and the colonels. But a leader could be a patrolman. A leader could be a firefighter. A leader could be a dispatcher. And I say that because I've often told people, they'll say, to your point, Rat, we don't have the budget to do this. They're never going to change anything. And I always say, I got it. But what influence can you make in your circle of influence? So you're a patrolman and you have your squad that you work with. What example can you set? What things can you start doing that your sergeant looks at and goes, you know what? That's a really good idea, Rat. I'm going to share that with my peers. And maybe we do something across the department the way you're doing. So my point is, don't just give up and say, you know what, this will never change. What change can you make? What impact, back to that word again, what impact can you make? Because if you're not going to make an impact, prepare for impact. Meaning if you're not going to do anything, then this is going to continue to crumble and you're going to be pretty displeased with the job and how it's being performed. So make an influence in your world, and, a tide rises all boats. So if you start doing things, people will notice. What you're looking with question on that concept.
There was a nautical phrase in there. I just missed it. Something about washing with tide. Very, very strong, Mark. He gets extra points, Ashley, on that one. So what do we call that, right, Maggie? So if it's not leadership and somebody's coming up and saying, hey, we should do this or whatever, do we not call that followership? If it is a line officer who now wants to support the leader, hey, boss, what can I do to help? What do you need right now? Here, let me take that off your plate so you can, supervise or whatever it is. I think an important part of leadership, and Maggie, you mentioned at the beginning, is that mentoring, followership as well. We want to let people know it's okay to support your leaders, because when they succeed, we're all going to succeed.
Yeah, good point.
I think that if we do these things, these little steps that we're talking about, even just getting ideas, I love that, Mark, of getting ideas from other areas, because, what is it? One of us is no smarter than all of us, right? They may be doing some amazing things that we haven't even thought of. But if we don't change that, we're going to continue to be building managers instead of leaders. And to me, even leadership, any kind of mentoring, it doesn't cost anything. I mean, one little example that I did, and I thought it was funny. I'm going to share this with you guys because at first my guys hated it when I first became a sergeant. And I would have to do a monthly report on them. They would have to do an evaluation every month, right? So I gave them a form, and in the form I put down, okay, what you accomplished this month, what, setbacks or what challenges did you have this month, and what would you do different, right? And at first, when I handed these out to my guys, I had a squad of 12. It's like, really, Sarge? Really? We got to do this with more paperwork, right? And so they would kind of complain. But every month, they were so proud, to hand me these things, and I would include it in their monthly evaluation. And I would remind them, like, even if they didn't include some things, they would like talk about things that they did accomplish, because a lot of times they didn't have anything that they accomplished. I go, yes, you did. You accomplished this, this, and this. And it was just bringing it to the forefront, making them think about what they did do, what challenges they had, but what positive things they did. And then afterwards, they all loved it. Even some of the other squad members took it to their sergeant and said, hey, let's start doing this. Because if nothing else, it just helped them to really realize that, hey, at the end of the month, you really did make a difference. It may not have been perfect, right? And everything, and you had some challenges, but you made a difference in somebody's life. And sometimes we forget to bring those things up, those positive affirmations of what we're doing on a daily basis. So that was something that didn't cost anything. And they loved it. Even when I left the squad and I got moved to an investigative entity, they continued to do it. I'm sure that I'm doing it to this day, but it's just little things, like you said. I didn't really know how to do any of that formally, but to me, I thought it was important to bring that up to them, and they kind of like appreciated it afterwards, even though they made fun of me at first,
Recognition.
Maggie, go ahead.
Recognition. I used to say recognition cost $1.49. And where I got that from is, in the military, you get this thing that you put on your chest, and that little ribbon cost $1, well, it did back then anyways, probably like $27 now, but it was $1.49, and it was the price of a piece of paper. But recognizing someone for something that they did is so empowering. It makes that person, we talk about it in our instructor development courses, right? We say, hey, when someone gives you an answer, recognize them with their name and thank them for that contribution. Because what we know in adult learning is that person is going to feel like, well, that felt pretty cool. I'm going to give another answer, meaning they're going to contribute more. And it goes right from the beginning, Rat, when you started this conversation about fellowship, to what you're saying, Maggie, about recognizing those people and their accomplishments. All of a sudden, what we're talking about is people being recognized and therefore feeling like they're making an impact. By the way, this current generation, the number one motivator in any job is they want to feel like they're making a difference. So if we can just do something like that for $1.49, man, that is a lot cheaper than what it costs me to recruit someone, train someone, put them out there and have them leave after 2 years or 3 years on the job. So those very simple things, great point, Maggie, but those very simple things. And again, who are we empowering? We're talking about the leader at the lowest level, if you will. We're not the chief. Yeah, the chief should be doing this too.
They're the front line. They're the one out there in the public.
They're the ones out there. Exactly right. But as a chief or a colonel, I've got to make sure I empower them to do that. So I need to reward you, Maggie, for taking that initiative. And this is a fantastic program. And I want to roll this all out across the whole department. That type of support. That's leadership from the front, from alongside, and behind.
Couldn't agree more, Mark. That's great. And none of this, I don't think, guys, would you agree that we can't do this sitting behind a desk in our office? We need to be on Front Street with our people. We need to be out there modeling good leadership behavior and listen to concerns out there. We can't do it from the office. And actually, that's the last word I got on it is you got to model the behavior. You got to be out there with your people. You can't be in the fog or going up and down with the tide or whatever Mark said. You got to be out there on Front Street with them. So
no, you got to stay aware. We talked about that before. Yeah. Awareness is the number one in my opinion, the number one tenet of leadership. You can't lead from a box. You can't lead from a vacuum.
Right.
You got to be aware of what's going on. And I would just add, just be aware of the wellness of your people, and do something about it.
Excellent. Cool.
And the changes
Ashley?
we make today will domino effect tomorrow. Now, whether it's going to be a positive domino effect or a negative one, that's up to you as a leader.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this series. Yeah, this was awesome. If you have any questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, please send us an email at podcast@ncbrt.lsu.edu. Make sure you subscribe to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.